Good afternoon, students. Today we are talking about verbal communication. As we learned in our early classes, what is communication, the process of communication, like there is a sender who sends message. First he encodes message, then he sends message. There is a medium with noise. Then there is a receiver who receives message, and before receiving the message, the receiver decodes the message. What is the message conveying by the sender is being conveyed by the sender. So first the receiver decodes the message, then he receives the message, then he or she gives his or her feedback to the sender. Then the communication process will be completed. So this is the communication process what we have early studied, and we have already studied there are two types of communication, basically two types of communication, that is verbal communication and non-verbal communication. So we are here to discuss about what is verbal communication. So first of all, I would like to tell you about the verbal communication, that the verbal communication are of two types basically. There is oral communication and written communication. Generally people know that the oral communication is a verbal communication, or they consider verbal communication as oral communication. So this is not true. Verbal communication consists both of communication, oral communication and written communication. So we can consider written communication is also as verbal communication. So first of all, this must be clear to all of you that verbal communication consists oral communication and written communication, both of them. Clear? Now we come into verbal communication. What is verbal communication? When we communicate to anybody through oral form or a written form, that is called verbal communication. The communication between two persons, when the communication occurs between two persons through written or oral form, that is called verbal communication. Clear? So that is, we can say that it is a use of words to share information with other people, and that's why it includes both spoken and written communication also. And the verbal element of communication is all about the words that we choose and how the words are heard and interpreted by the receiver, है ना? And after that, after receiving the message, the receiver gives feedback according to the interpretation of the message. Okay, so that is all about verbal communication, and this is a two-way process. Verbal communication is a two-way process because there is a sender and there is a receiver. So communication is a two-way process. There is a sender and there is a receiver. We have already learned. So this means that both the sending and the receiving of the messages are equally important. Sender is important, and at the same time receiver is also important equally. Verbal communication, that's why verbal communication requires both a speaker, that means a speaker or a writer, because as we already discussed that verbal communication consists both of communication, oral and written. So it requires a speaker or a writer, we can say, to transmit the message, and a listener or a receiver or reader, we can say, to make sense of the message, to receive the message, to interpret the message, to decode the message. So there must be a receiver, reader or a listener. So then further we will discuss both the part of it, and it is important to remember that effective verbal communication cannot be fully isolated from non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication is always there with the verbal communication. Like I am talking to you, I am discussing with all of you, by doing verbal communication, by doing oral communication to all of you, I am doing non-verbal communication simultaneously. You can see, like I am moving my hands, I am moving my eyes here and there. Sometimes I am trying to make an eye contact to all of you, though it is a video lecture, but still I am trying to have an eye contact with all of you. I am just moving my hand sometimes, so I am just nodding my head like this, and I am smiling sometimes. So this is a non-verbal communication. So non-verbal communication always occurs with verbal communication. So it is important to remember that effective verbal communication that cannot be cannot be isolated from non-verbal communication, like our body language, tone of voice. That is very important. Tone of voice is also considered as non-verbal communication that we will learn in non-verbal communication further. That is paralinguistic feature of non-verbal communication. Tone of voice, that is called non-verbal communication, paralinguistic feature of non-verbal communication. Facial expression, as I said to all of you. For example, suppose clarity of speech, remaining calm and focused, being polite, and some basic rules of etiquette that will all aid the process of verbal communication. So these non-verbal communication adds or just runs simultaneously with verbal communication. Even in written communication, sometimes we use non-verbal communication. So this is the basic verbal communication skills, that is effective speaking and listening. Clear? Effective speaking and listening, or effective writing, or effective reading, we can say, means basic verbal communication. So effective speaking involves three main areas, that is the words we choose, how the words we pronounce the words, and how we reinforce them with other non-verbal communication, means how do we correlate, how do we just express our words with non-verbal communication. So the effective communication, the effective speaking, that involves three basic areas, three main areas. One is the words we choose, the other one is the words, how do we say, how do we speak, how do we pronounce the words, and the third, how do we reinforce them with other non-verbal communication. So active listening or active reading, that is an important skill. That is a very important skill. However, when we communicate, we tend to spend far more energy considering what we are going to say than listening to the other person. So these include, means listening or reading. Suppose I am speaking to all of you, you all are listening to me. Okay, so you are listener, you are I am communicating verbally to all of you because I am speaking and you all are listening to me. If I am going to write something to all of you, so again I am the sender, I am the writer, and if you read the same what I am writing to you now, if you will read the same, then you are again the reader and you are the receiver of the message. So what should be the points that a listener or a reader should be careful about that? What the points we should be careful about? Means the reader or the listener should be careful. So first of all, the listener or the reader should be prepared to listen to or should be prepared to read. That is very important. First of all, the receiver must be prepared to receive the message. Otherwise, the communication will be failure. Then, second one is keep the listener or the reader should keep an open mind. Means they should keep their mind open so that they can consider all the things without having any partiality or without having any discrimination. Whatever the speaker or the writer is conveying the messages. So that is very important point, that a listener or a reader must keep an open mind or must have an open mind to listen to or to read openly without having any discrimination. Clear? The third point is a reader or a listener must concentrate on the main direction of the speaker's message. That that is the theme of the message. If the listener or the reader has got some barrier, some cultural barrier, some noise barrier, some physical barrier, but if the listener or the reader must be focused on or must concentrate on what the speaker or the writer is saying or the conveying the message, so the reader or the listener must concentrate on the main direction, main theme of what the speaker is speaking or the writer is writing. So speaker's message, do concentrate on speaker's message. That is the third point. Clear? Concentration or having focus, that is very important. That is vital thing to listen to properly or to read properly anything. Then again the fourth point, the very important point, that is avoid the listener or a listener or a reader, that avoid distractions. That is very important point in verbal communication, because there are so many distractions we can find in our surroundings. So if we are listening to somebody, if we are reading something, then we must not distract our mind here and there. We must not wander here and there, and we must, like we just discussed in our first point. We have discussed third point, that is that we should concentrate. So we should not be distracted here and there. That is a fourth point. Fifth point is a listener or a reader should be objective. Means what is the main objective of the message, what the speaker or the writer are conveying. So that is the main important thing, that the listener or a reader that must focus on the objective of the message. What is the objective of the message? Then another point is that listener or reader should not be trying to think of their next question. Suppose they are listening to something, and whatever the speaker is speaking, and they are listening to carefully, but sometimes they distract here and there, and on the other hand they start thinking about the other question. So that what the speaker is speaking at the same time, the listener cannot listen to that message properly, because the listener is thinking what should be the next question, or the listener is thinking about the next question, that what should we ask next question. So that the listener should not think about the other question at the same time when the speaker is speaking anything. Clear? Another point is the listener should not dwell on one or two points at the expense of others. Means listener should not grasp or should not accept 2 points at the same time. Okay, so this is the very important point that listener should be careful about. And the last one is that the listener should not stereotype the speaker. Okay, means we should not consider the speaker, we should not consider the writer that he or she is stereotyped. We should receive the message, means the listener should receive the message openly, with open mind. Clear? So these are the points that the active listener must follow. Clear? And then what are the points to improve our verbal communication? What are the points to make our verbal communication effective, means both written and oral? So by the help of more advanced techniques, we can improve our verbal communication, means orally and written, also both the communication. this means this age is a technical age, we can say, and there are so many technologies in our hand right now nowadays. So we have so many resources through which we can make our verbal communication effective. Clear? So these are the points to make our verbal communication effective. That is reinforcement, we have already discussed it. Reflection, that means ki whatever the speaker is speaking in verbal communication, the receiver should reply it, reflect it. Clarification means when the speaker is speaking something or the writer is writing something, so the message must be very clear. That is very important thing, that must be very clear so that the reader or the listener can grasp it properly or appropriately. So the message must be very clear. That must not be ambiguous. That must not be a speaker should not use jargon words, ambiguous words, vague words, or very clist words, clist language. A speaker should not use. A speaker should use very clear, simple, precise, concise sentences and very clear words. A speaker should have a very good pronunciation so that the listener or the the reader can receive it properly, appropriately. So that is very important, that the message must be clear. Okay. Then the other point is questioning. When the speaker is speaking something or the writer is writing something, means we are discussing about how to make our oral communication or verbal communication, means written communication and oral communication both, how to make it effective. Okay. So questioning is very important. Suppose I am giving a lecture, I am discussing with all of you verbal communication. So meanwhile a speaker should ask question. Meanwhile or at the end of the lecture, a speaker or a writer should ask question to the reader or to the listener, that any queries or whatever the question. Okay. He should also ask, and the listener or the reader, they should also ask the question. Then they should also give their feedback according to the answer, whatever they get, according to their questions. Clear? So to make our verbal communication effective, this point is very important. Then to make our verbal communication effective, our message, means the speaker's message or the writer's message, must be correct. Correct means the message must be grammatically correct, the message must be punctuationally correct, the message must be syntactically correct, semantically correct. So if we can see the message is correct, then the receiver receives message properly. Otherwise the miscommunication or misunderstandings occur at the same time. So speaker must focus on their message, that must be correct. Okay. And our message should be, means speaker's message should be concise also. So concised also, speaker's message should be concised also, because sometimes a speaker speaks a lot and they enhance the words, they enhance the sentence, they enhance the content, means they speak a lot sometimes. So speaker should be concise, means the fact and the figure and the message must be brief but complete. That is the definition of concise. Ki the message or the writing or the speaking, that must be very clear, that must be completed, but it must be brief, in a brief manner, means to the point. Speaker should speak on to the point. Clear? So that message must be concise. So these are the points that a speaker or a writer must follow to make their verbal communication effective. Okay, so we're talking about reinforcement, that is the use of encouraging words alongside non-verbal gestures such as head nods like this. Okay, a warm facial expression, like sometimes we smile, sometimes we just get calm. So, and maintaining eye contact like I am doing with all of you, I am trying. And questioning, we have talked about the questioning is broadly how we obtain information from others on any specific area or topic. Clear? And reflecting and clarifying, we have already discussed. Reflecting the process of feeding back to another person, like we are giving our feedback is the very important aspect of any communication, successful communication. If feedback is there, then the message is successful, the communication is successful. So reflecting is the process of giving feedback to another person, whatever you are understanding of what has been said or what is being said. Clear? And closing communication means the way our communication is closed or ended, that will at least in part determine the way a conversation is remembered. है ना? Means whatever we conclude, or that must also be very effective. The conclusion, the closing part of any message, that must be very effective, that must be very appropriate and proper manner, in a proper manner. Clear? So this is all about verbal communication. What is verbal communication? How to make our verbal communication effective, means oral communication and written communication, how to make it effective. And these are the things we have learned in today's class, and in our next class we will discuss about non-verbal communication. So clear? So if you have any queries, you can just ask me in the class.